One of the, frankly, many things that I truly love about the Elder Scrolls franchise is the in game books that you can read while playing the game. Having a book to read allows you to break up the pace of gameplay at your leisure rather than having the pace broken up for you like in some other games, and that is a huge advantage for the flow of gameplay. But as far as I'm concerned, that is a secondary benefit to the primary benefit that is the lore and world building that they provide. It is difficult for world building and lore to be provided to a player through dialogue without it feeling unnatural. It's like in a movie when a character begins their exposition with the phrase, as you know, it feels unnatural to be exposited at with things your character should know like the back of their paw. Having the in game books there to provide that needed exposition allows the process to feel much more natural. And because it's an optional thing, if the subject matter isn't interesting to you, you can just put the book down and not really be missing out on anything. But one massive benefit that having in game books provides is the allowance for putting forward mutually exclusive pieces of information. Humans are diverse and their opinions are many. People don't agree on everything. Sometimes they don't agree on anything. For this reason, one of my favorite books in the entire Elder Scrolls franchise is The War of Bethany. There are actually two books with that title, each written by a different author. As you may be able to guess by the name of the book, those two different authors are representing each side of the War of Bethany. So, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read both versions of the book. While I'm doing so, please keep in mind the perspective of the author. Despite them describing the same events, note how their presentations of these events differ. History is written by the victors, so let us start with The War of Bethany by Volper Newgate. The history of the Iliac Bay, if told in its entirety, would horrify readers more than the most gruesome legend of the Underking. In comparison to the wars of the First and Second Era, our most recent appeal to arms, the War of Bethany, pales. The siege of Orsinium lasted from First Era 950 until First Era 980 without a pause. 1,000 years later, the Thracian plague, coupled with the War of Righteousness, slayed over half the population of the Iliac Bay. And yet, the War of Bethany fascinates us, and not just because of its immediacy. Ironically, Lord Mogreff of Bethany was seeking peace when he asked for Daggerfall's protection on the Isle of Bethany. The island had long been independent, but as the piracy in the bay increased, Mogreff truly realized Bethany's vulnerability. King Lysandus agreed to be Bethany's liege, on the advice of many, including his archpriest of Kinnereth, Lord Vanetch. While Bethany is a prosperous fishing island and well placed strategically, the vassalage of Bethany was primarily an act of charity. Lysandus knew that if someone did not help Bethany, it would fall to the pirates, if not to someone worse. Unfortunately, King Cameron of Sentinel did not agree, citing a 200-year-old contract obliquely if not illegally written to suggest that Bethany was a traditional holding of the Kingdom of Sentinel. Cameron declared war. The majority of his advisors, being warlords in a traditionally bellicose country, supported their king in this. The chief counselor, a woman called the Oracle, foresaw death and defeat in the war, but her wisdom was stifled and she was banished from court. Cameron should have listened to her. A few scrimmages of the War of Bethany went to Sentinel, but the major battles were all won by Daggerfall. King Lysandus, his heir Prince Gothred, and the general of the army Lord Bridwell were fine leaders and warriors as well, and the Battle of the Bluffs and the Siege of Craghold both went to Daggerfall. The war might have been won with one more victory, but for an unusual domestic incident in King Lysandus's court. The king's mother, the Dowager Queen Nilfgaard, had been uneasy about the war since its beginning, but she now began to have visions of cataclysm. She saw the death of her beloved son should the war continue. Ebullient by his success, King Lysandus refused to listen to her fears until Nilfgaard left court. Lysandus then realized how certain she was about his impending death. He began to actively negotiate a peace treaty with Sentinel, using the neutral lordship of Reichgradkeep as facilitator. The Treaty of Reichgradkeep was never to be. King Cameron was initially civil, as the losing side of a war is often civil, but when he realized that the proposed treaty would have included a formal declaration that the kingdoms of Sentinel and Daggerfall would share Bettany, he flew into a rage. With no thought for the protocol of attacking a neutral, peaceable lordship, Cameron ordered his army to riot through Reich Grodkeep. First the halls of the palace, and then the streets of the capital ran red with blood. It was only with the support of the Daggerfall army that the chaos was brought under relative control. The Sentinel army fled to the Yorth Burrowland, and the Daggerfall army chased them as far as the Ravenian forest before making camp. 1 week later, after each had had a chance to send for reinforcements and plan their strategies, the armies met in the field that separated them, the flowering meadowland called Cringane Field. In the heat of the clash, an unnatural fog spread over the field, blinding all combatants. When the mist finally lifted, King Lysandas's body was found, his throat pierced by an unmarked arrow. Daggerfall did not waste any time in mourning. Young Prince Gothred, who had shown great bravery in battle and was very popular among the troops, was crowned King of Daggerfall just behind the battle lines, and he ordered the army onward. Perhaps it was the sight of the brave young warrior turned king appearing on the battlefield in full regalia that inspired the Daggerfall army. Perhaps the battle would have turned regardless. Sentinel began to panic. King Gothred met King Cameron before the Red Guards had retreated, and the two monarchs fought. Both were excellent warriors, but Gothred was a more skillful swordsman, and Cameron fell that day. Lord Resme of Sentinel formally surrendered to Daggerfall, giving up all rights to Bettany officially. He later committed suicide on the ship back to Sentinel. Peace was a difficult process for the cities and towns on both sides of the Iliac Bay. As part of the formal peace treaty, King Gothred asked for the hand of Princess Obki, only daughter of the late King Cameron and the Queen Regent Akarithi. The request was intended to restore friendship between the kingdoms, and it was partially successful, though many in the royal court of Sentinel viewed the princess as more a prisoner of war than a bond to Daggerfall. The only surviving member of the ruling family of Reich Grodkeep was a sickly infant, so the councillors of state appealed to Lord Auberon Flight, a cousin of Lord Craddock, to rule the lordship and regency. Lord Flight accepted, and his strong, almost dictatorial style was just what Reich Grodkeep needed to restore order after the bloody Treaty of Reich Grodkeep. His subjects were grateful that when the infant heir died, they not only elevated his wife Doriana and him from regents to rulers, they agreed to rename the lordship in his honor. Reich Grodkeep became Anticlair, named after his ancestral home. The horrors of the War of Bettany still live on, even in Anticlair. Whether Daggerfall and Sentinel will be able to use the marriage of King Gothred and Princess Obki as a symbol of peace rather than discord is something that only the future can show. Written the 14th of Sun's Dawn in the Third Era 404. And now I will read The War of Bettany by Favte. Could there be a better proof of the natural perversity of Bretons than their conduct before, during, and after what history will remember as the War of Bettany? By the most depraved of motivations, the most despicable of tactics, and the most ungentlemanly of triumphs, the kingdom of Daggerfall changed the nature of warfare in the Iliac Bay and perhaps over all of Tamriel. In Sentinel, we call the recent carnage the Siege of Bettany, but as the book of history is writ by the victors, let us speak instead of the War of Bettany. Red Guards, by their nature, are a modest and practical people. We are not phlegmatic like the High Elves, nor cowardly like the Wood Elves and Khajiit. But what would infuriate and enrage the swaggering, vainglorious Nords and Bretons would not merit a shrug from a Red Guard. Had any Breton kingdom possessed the little island of Bettany, it would have been covetously guarded. Bettany's trade would have been seriously restricted, its religion subjugated, its people bound by active and constant pledges and duties of vassalage. But Bettany was not a Breton dominion. Bettany was part of the kingdom of Sentinel. King Lysandas, may the Old Ones continue to torment his soul for his wickedness, saw the prosperous island which is closer to his land than to Sentinel, and his black heart turned to avarice. Through threats, lies, acts of piracy, and finally invasion, Daggerfall illegally took possession of the island of Bettany. His court sorceress, the Lady Medora, his enchantress mother, and other experienced counselors were horrified by the brutality of his campaign and begged him to abandon his tyrannical act of war. Gradually, all dissenters were removed from court. None but the ignorant and the warmongers remained. Our late King Cameron tried to employ civil diplomacy with Daggerfall, but in the end he made the former declaration of war. Daggerfall and Sentinel have fought many times in their 2,000 years of coexistence, and Cameron knew the black magic and espionage the Bretons considered honest warfare. Never debasing the Sentinel character by duplicating the Breton villainy, Cameron knew best how to combat Lysandus. King Lysandus's knavish battle tactics were even more perfidious than his ancestors, and the war continued to rage until it began to involve more than Sentinel and Daggerfall. Lord Graddock, ruler of Reich Grodkeep, acted as conciliator between Sentinel and Daggerfall, and eventually convinced both monarchs to meet and make peace. The ill-fated Treaty of Grodkeep began civilly. The terms of peace were discussed, agreed on, and set to paper. The terms were excessively generous. Cameron had agreed to give up some of his rights to Bettany in order to placate the madness of Lysandus and bring peace back to the Iliac Bay. It was not until King Cameron read the treaty he was about to sign that he realized the outrageous perfidy of the Bretons. The treaty had actually been purposefully miswritten by the Daggerfall scribe in a desperate and ignominious attempt to trick Cameron into signing a contract different from the one to which he had agreed. The castle of Reich Grodkeep erupted into bloodbath, and the war continued. The Battle of Cringane Field was the tragic ending of the senseless war of attrition. The Cringane Field is located in between the Yorth Burland and the Revenian Forest, where the armies of Sentinel and Daggerfall respectively made camp after the massacre at Reich Grodkeep. As the battle began, Daggerfall proved that she had some foul Daedric magical tricks left by blinding the Redguard army with a wall of mist. Lysandus did not have the opportunity to gloat over his cousinage for long, for the sure arm of a Sentinel archer struck him in the throat even through the thick, swirling fog. Lysandus' son, Gothred, who had spent the battle in lugubrious relaxation, was crowned without ceremony, and thereupon demanded a duel with King Cameron. Cameron was many years Gothred's senior, and though a superior warrior, was exhausted from the endless warfare the boy king had been spared. Nevertheless, as a point of honor, our king agreed to the duel. The new king of Daggerfall, by dirty trick and black magic, managed to backstab our king before the duel ever began. Thus, the victor of Cringane Field and the War of Bettany was Daggerfall. Daggerfall's wickedness continued even after her inglorious victory. While the widow queen of Sentinel, Her Majesty Akarithi, mourned and tried to mend her shattered lands, Gothred demanded the Princess of Sentinel as a hostage of war. To save her homeland, the Princess Obki agreed to leave Sentinel and even marry the murderer of her father. But we true Redguards of Sentinel know where her love and honor lies. The Queen of Daggerfall is the Princess of Sentinel, first and foremost. So, what do y'all think? The tones of the authors are clearly different. The first is more aloof and presents the report as factual, whereas the second doesn't attempt to hide their scathing bitterness. While the books go over the same events, how they do so is very different. The state of Bettany itself prior to the war is represented differently. The massacre at Reich Grodkeep is represented differently. The Wall of Fog blinded both armies in the first, but only blinded the Redguard army in the second. Then Prince Gothred is represented differently in each account, as is the duel itself, and various other differences. The joy of this, to me, is that it brings that feeling of authenticity to the world. Look at any real life conflict, historical or modern, and see the things that each side of that conflict said in its aftermath. These disagreements happen all the time. I think that it is a shame that the Elder Scrolls franchise only does this on occasion. While there are plenty of other pieces of writing that conflict with each other, I don't think any of them do it to the degree that these two books do. This direct opposition is fairly rare in the franchise. I also have to say that it is a shame that these books don't show up past Daggerfall. Even the one by Vulper Newgate, writing for the side that was victorious, doesn't show up in Morrowind, Oblivion, or Skyrim. These books just make the world feel real to me, and I appreciate that about the setting. Anyway, that's it. Short video this time, but this was a little side thing while I'm working on a larger project. Actually, two larger projects, but that's neither here nor there. Like, subscribe, share the video with someone, but please don't spam it anywhere. If you'd like to leave a comment, but you don't know what to say, what's your favorite book in the Elder Scrolls franchise? Other than the sermons of Vivek, of course.